Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to another Pokemon video. I'm your host Ryan, and today we're going to be talking about Trick Room abusers. Last week I made a video about Trick Room setters, and that was a top 7. This time it's going to be abusers, and it's actually a top 10. As per usual, the disclaimers are that I'm not going to be posting any EV spreads for the Pokemon I discuss here. I think that those should be personalized to the team that you are making. And of course, these are my opinions. So let's get started. Number 10 is Dragovish. Now, Dragovish is a dragon water type with a 90 attack and a 75 speed. Its notable ability is Strong Jaw, and its notable moves are Vicious Rend, Crunch, Ice Fang, Super Fang, Rock Slide, Iron Head, Psychic Fangs, Outrage, and Leech Life. Now, you might have heard a lot about Dragovish. It's recently been popularized by Wolfie Glick. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And the reason for that is because of the single most important move on a Dragovish is Vicious Rend. Vicious Rend, if you attack before your target has attacked that turn, the base power doubles, and it also works with Strong Jaw. So I don't know the exact number, but the base power of this move in ideal scenarios is basically 220 or something around that. It's monstrous. So you're probably wondering why it's number 10. So first of all, I mean, its typing is really good. Water Dragon is a very, very good typing. It's weak to 2 things. Very good. Vicious Rend is also a really, really good option. However, here's the few things. So first of all, it requires an Iron Ball. 75 speed, I think, isn't bad for Trick Room. I think, a lot of people will claim that 60 base speed is pretty much the cap for Trick Room. But the reality is the cap for Trick Room is whatever is below the average of the current meta. So, like, for example, in VGC 2014, I ran Trick Room Charizard, Mega Charizard, and Mega Kangaskhan, and they worked wonders because the average was base 100, so I was underspeeding that. However, Dragovish really does need to be as slow or as fast as possible because of Vicious Rend. So you are required to run Iron Ball on Dragovish. Quick side note, room service is practically unnecessary unless you're running a Pokemon inside of that can function inside of Trick Room but functions also outside of Trick Room. That's really the only niche it fills. If you want to lower your speed for a Pokemon permanently in Trick Room, you want to use either Iron Ball or the Macho Brace, because the Macho Brace won't remove your Flying type or Levitate. So that's just a little quick tip there. But yeah, so it definitely requires an Iron Ball, and we'll get to that in a second. You really should not Dynamax Dragovish, and that is a con, because you lose the effect of Vicious Rend. You lose both the doubling effect and the Strong Jaw ability for that move. And with a base 90 attack, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's actually not that strong. And like I just said, it is weak outside of Vicious Rend. 90 base attack isn't like, the end times in terms of damaging. It's still up there. But when you see the rest of the Pokemon on the list, you'll realize that 90 base attack is not good. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's really only there for the water nuke. And in addition to that, it doesn't really have any support options. I mean, you're a sweeper, so it doesn't really matter. But I do consider that in when I make these lists, because if you have a bad lead or something, and you can't really use your water type attack, like say they bring in a Gastrodon, or they're going to bring in a Gastrodon, it's nice to have other options. And since it's weak physically, and its move pool it's okay, it's not great. I mean, it's good. I take that back. It does have a good move pool, but it doesn't have the power to back it up. Support options would be great. It just doesn't really get anything. So back to Iron Ball. So this is the fossil Pokemon. There's 4 fossil Pokemons. There's another fossil Pokemon that also gets Vicious Rend, and that is Arctovish. Now, the problem with Arctovish is it doesn't get Strong Jaw. So, because Strong Jaw is so powerful, the only way for Arctovish to be as strong as Dragovish is with a Choice Band, and that's without Dragovish even having an item. So Dragovish is 100% the better option over Arctovish. Arctovish serves, in my opinion, has no niche. There's no reason to ever use an Arctovish. If you want that powerful water type stab, you're going to use Dracovish instead of Arctovish. In fact, Iron Ball makes it slower than Arctovish, so something to consider. Now, we are going to stick to number 10 because there is another option over Dracovish that fills the same niche but also has its own slightly different niche, and that is Araquanid. Now, Araquanid is Water Bug, has much lower attack but much lower speed, 70 attack and 42 speed. Now, Iron Ball does underspeed the Araquanid set because that's just how Iron Ball works. Its ability is Water Bubble, so Water Bubble is a 3-part ability, and I'm honestly surprised it wasn't nerfed in this game. So the first thing it does is it gives you a resistance to fire. So normally you'd be neutral to fire, but now you are resistant to fire. The second thing it does is it gives you an immunity burn, which is really, really good, especially since Araquanid is a physical attacker. And the third thing, and the most important thing that puts it in the same niche as Dracovish, is that it doubles the power of water-type moves. And that's really, really good. So we've got Liquidation, Waterfall, Dive, which I'll get to in a second, Crunch, Leech Life, Lunge, Wide Guard, Mirror Coat, Reflect, and Poison Jab. Now, generally speaking, like Dracovish, you are going to be using this thing as a water-type attacker. It doesn't hit as hard as Dracovish, but last generation it was the strongest water-type attack, so it still has its purposes. Now, Dive is an interesting choice because with Dive, you can stall out Dynamax turns, and that's actually really, really useful. And that's a tech that I've been seeing pop up every here and there. And I think it's actually a useful niche to have something that can do that. In addition, because Araquanid is slow, you can dive on the last turn of Trick Room, and then you won't get hit until the end of the next turn anyway. So it has its uses. So the niche that Araquanid fills over Dracovish is it does bring a lot of supportive options. So its attack is really low with 70, but it gets Lunge, which lowers the attack. It gets Crunch, which has a chance to lower defense. It has Wide Guard, it has Mirror Coat, which is really nice. It has Reflect, so it has some options, and that's really the only niche that it would fill. On my team that I'm running right now, I would use Araquanid over Dracovish because I need Wide Guard support, but I also need that really powerful water stab. So the pros, Water Bubble is an amazing ability, Wide Guard, and this one can Dynamax. Dracovish loses everything when it Dynamaxes. It doesn't get Vicious Rend. It doesn't get Strong Jaw. But Araquanid keeps its Water Bubble. Water Bubble affects max moves, so it still can hit really hard as a Dynamax. Cons, obviously, it's really weak outside of Water Stab. I mean, you can use it. It's usable. It's just not recommended. So, coming in at number 9 is Escavalier. Now, Escavalier is Bug Steel. It has 135 attack, 20 speed. Its abilities are Swarm, Battle Armor, and Overcoat. They all have their purposes. I think Overcoat's the best, but generally speaking, they're all okay. There's nothing here that's gonna break anything, and we'll get to that into the cons. But notable moves: Iron Head, X-Scissor, Quick Guard, Fell Stinger, Razor Shell, Mega Horn, Poison Jab, Close Combat, Drill Run, Night Slash, and Knockoff. Fell Stinger is really weak, so keep that in mind, but it drastically raises your attack if you get a KO, and with 135 attack, if you hit super effectively, you might get an attack rate. So that's one of those niche picks that I like to throw in on some of these Pokemon if I can find it, because it serves a purpose. So the pros, I think its move pool is pretty good. I think its typing is really good. Really only weak to fire, I think. Yeah, only weak to fire. So you got to keep that in mind. But it's still pretty good typing. Its stats are great. 135 attack and 20 speed is excellent for a Trick Room setter. The cons, I think its abilities kind of hold it back a little bit. There's nothing really there that are great. I mean, if you run, say, Focus Sash Escavalier and you take a fire attack, Swarm's going to hit really hard. The only problem is that Bug isn't really the greatest of offensive typing, so I don't know. I think I think if it had a different ability, like maybe some sort of like joust ability, where if it's sort of like a strong jaw, but it works for like jab moves, that would be pretty cool. But it doesn't, so that's just speculation. So that's why I think I did put its move pool in the top as a pro, but it's also a con because a lot of the moves it gets are actually kind of weak in general. Like Razor Shell is not as good as Liquidation or Waterfall. Drill Run is not as good as High Horsepower. Night Slash is not as good as Crunch. Knockoff is sort of good, but it's only good once against a Pokemon. So it has a good move pool, and it actually is a good choice for a Dynamax Pokemon. But generally speaking, it has a diverse move pool, but not a strong move pool, if that makes sense. So, moving on, we have number 8, which is Vikavolt, which is a bug electric Pokemon. It has 145 special attack, that's supposed to say special attack, 43 speed. Its ability is Levitate. It only gets a Levitate, so you don't have a choice, but Levitate's really good. It means that its electric typing is actually not a hindrance in any way, shape, or form. It's a pure boon. Its notable moves are Thunderbolt, Bug Buzz, Air Slash, Volt Switch, Flash Cannon, Energy Ball, and Eerie Impulse. Again, another one of those weird options. Eerie Impulse is a priority move that lowers special attack. If you lead Vikavolt, it might help you survive an attack. You might be able to combo this with Hatterene against like a Duraludon. There's probably some kind of tech there. Pros, its stats are great. 145 special attack, 43 speed. It's relatively defensive, not crazy defensive. I didn't put defensive stats on this because we're just talking about their offensive capabilities, but I will mention, defensive stats when I can. And Electric plus Levitate is so good. Electric is just generally one of the better offensive typings to have. And Levitate just means defensively, instead of being neutral to ground, it's immune to ground, and that's really, really good. Cons, move pool. It doesn't really get very much. It gets what's necessary, but there are things that wall it very hard. Steel types will wall it. Depending on the steel type. Common things like Duraludon and Ferrothorn will wall it, although you do a lot of damage to them anyway. But generally speaking, its move pool is not very good. And Bug, as I mentioned before with Escavalier, it's not a great offensive typing. But yeah, I think Vikavolt's really good. I use it on pretty much all of my teams because it is very strong. Moving on, we've got number 7 is Cankelder, fighting type, 140 attack, 45 speed. Its abilities, all 3 of them are good: Guts, Sheer Force, and Iron Fist. Notable moves are Hammer Arm, Drain Punch, Close Combat, Brick Break, Rock Slide, Helping Hand, Thunder, Ice, and Fire Punches, Wide Guard, and High Horsepower, which I don't really understand why it gets all of a sudden. Helping Hand, it's not really, you're probably never going to run Helping Hand on Cankelder, but there might be something that you like. Maybe you have a Pokemon on your team that underspeeds the fairy, but Cankelder doesn't, but can one hit KO the fairies, so you Helping Hand to make sure Cankelder survives. Brick Break, generally speaking, you won't see people recommend Brick Break, but I think this generation is really good for screens and Aurora Veil, so I think Brick Break's actually going to be relatively good this generation, because as you might know or may not know, Brick Break does break through screens. It actually removes them from the field. So I think that's actually a pretty good option. I don't think many people are going to be running it. If you're running Trick Room, you're probably going to be running Hammer Arm or Drain Punch. So, yeah. Pros, very, very strong. Basically all of its abilities raise its attack in some way and raise its damage. So it's going to hit really hard no matter what set you run. It has a pretty diverse move pool with good coverage. Ground, rock, and fighting is just really strong. And then you have the option of throwing in an elemental punch. I think that's all you need. Wide guard is also really, really helpful, which is another pro. Cons, are mostly related to the abilities, because no matter what you pick, there's going to be a negative for your ability. Guts requires poison or burn damage. You could run a Rest Talk set, but I think that kind of detracts from the move pool aspect of Cankelder. Sheer Force, you don't get stab for Sheer Force on anything worthwhile. You do get it on Power Up Punch, but that's even without Sheer Force, that's outclassed by like Close Combat or even Drain Punch. So there's really no reason to run Power Up Punch. And Iron Fist, despite having really good, it works on Hammer Arm, I believe. Don't quote me on that. It works on all 3 punches. Despite it having that, it doesn't have nearly as much damage as Guts or Sheer Force. It's about 10% lower than Sheer Force, 20% lower than Guts. So, there's sort of, when you choose Cankelder, you're choosing for an offensive Pokemon, but you're also getting somewhat of a little bit of a negative with each of its abilities. Moving on, we have number 6, which is Snorlax. Snorlax is normal type, 110 attack, 30 speed. Notable abilities are Thick Fat and Gluttony. However, you will most likely see Gluttony. Gluttony is the best, and we'll get into that. Notable moves: Belly Drum, Recycle, Facade, Body Slam, Double Edge, Crunch, Heavy Slam, Hammer Arm, High Horsepower, Fire, Ice, and Thunder Punch, Brick Break, Rock Slide, Seed Bomb, Sen Headbutt, Gunk Shot, Wild Charge, Heat Crash, and Darkest Lariat. Well, first of all, we'll just talk about the combo, which is one of the pros: Gluttony, Belly Drum, and Recycle. So Belly Drum drops you to 50% health. If you have a Citrus Berry, that will automatically proc even without Gluttony, but you can still use Gluttony with other berries, such as the Pinch Berries. Or if you want more defense, you can use a Defense Berry or a Special Defense Berry. Recycle lets you keep getting that berry back and back and back. Really nice. So that's really strong. Really, Snorlax's biggest niche is Belly Drum, and we'll get into why that's actually a con. But it does have a really, really good move pool. Its defensive stats is actually really tanky. It has really high HP and really good special defense and good defense. But, the cons here and why it's only number 6 and not higher. In other generations, and even in this generation, you'll see a lot of Snorlax used with Trick Room. And that's because Belly Drum is really strong. And that's because, Recycle does have really good combos. But the problem is that without Belly Drum, it only has 110 attack, which doesn't seem like a lot. Which doesn't seem like not a lot. It seems pretty good. And it is. It's not bad. It's a little more than average, I believe. I think 100 is about the average. But the problem is, with the rest of the list, it's actually a lot weaker than other physical options. Its strongest set is Belly Drum, which means that you need to set it up, which sort of, at least in VGC, it's not super easy. I mean, there are ways to do it, but it's not super easy to do it inside of Trick Room, because you want to get Trick Room and Belly Drum up on the same turn, so the next turn you can start attacking. So like I mean, I guess in one way it does split the attention of your opponent, but in another way you are cutting your health to 50% and then gaining a little bit more with Citrus Berry, but you are weakening yourself just to get stronger. And I personally don't think that it's best, but once you get that up, oh boy. And one of the cons is normal stab is just not good. It doesn't hit anything super effectively. It's resisted and immune by quite a few types. So it's really not the greatest. Now, one thing that I didn't put here is that it does have a Gigantamax form that is legal in VGC currently. This form does allow you to, whenever you hit your max move, I forget what it's called, it hits with a normal type attack, and it functions as a 50% chance recycle. So that's actually really good. I think that's really powerful. I don't think it's as powerful as other Gigantamax forms, but I think it's one of the better Gigantamax forms. So that is actually a pro that I forgot to put in, probably because I didn't have enough room for it to begin with. So keep that in mind. We are going to talk about another number 6 Pokemon, and that is Greedent. Now, Greedent is pretty much a slightly different Snorlax. So it is normal typing. It does have 95 attack, 20 speed, so it's weaker but slower. It gets Cheek Pouch and Gluttony, but Cheek Pouch is the one that you want to look after, because Cheek Pouch, what that allows you to do is when you heal with a Citrus Berry after belly drumming, you'll actually go back to full. So if you can get it's a little bit of a better belly drum set, because you don't have to, you will be full. So if you want to calc out for specific attacks, you can do that a lot easier. Its move pool is a lot weaker than Snorlax's. It has Facade, it has Body Slam. Super Fang is an option if you want to go more of a supportive Greedent. Crunch, Iron Tail, it doesn't really get a good steel move other than Gyro Ball. Body Press, which is interesting. It gets Fire, Ice, and Thunder Fangs, not punches. Superpower, Seed Bomb, Psychic Fangs, and Wild Charge. So just a quick thing about Stuffed Cheeks. Stuffed Cheeks gives you plus defense when you eat. It forces you to eat your berry, and then you get a plus in your defense. So it's actually pretty unique. I think that might be a pretty interesting way to run Greedent. It doesn't get recycled though, so it does sort of have a little bit of a downgrade to Snorlax in my opinion. I don't think it's as good as Snorlax. I do think it has its niche over Snorlax, because its defensive stats, while similar to Snorlax, it has more physical defense. And like I said, Belly Drum, Cheek Pouch, and Citrus combo is really good. Its move pool, like Snorlax's, while not as diverse, is still pretty diverse. Cons, offensive stats aren't literally the same cons as Snorlax. Its offensive stats aren't the best. It pretty much relies on Belly Drum to be threatening, and normal type stab is just not very good. Moving on, we have number 5, which is Mudsdale. Ground type, base 125 attack, 35 speed. Notable abilities are Stamina and Inner Focus. Inner Focus is good because it prevents Fake Out, although Fake Out isn't going to be as good this generation, so really what you want to focus on is the Stamina. Every time you get hit by attack, whether special or physical, whether it makes contact or not, your defense gets raised 1 stage. That is really good, and we'll get into why that's really good. Notable moves are High Horsepower, Heavy Slam, Close Combat, Rock Slide, and Body Press. Body Press is probably going to be better than Close Combat, but they do have their interchanges. If you don't know what Body Press does, Body Press, it's sort of like Foul Play, but instead of using your opponent's attack, it uses your defense stat as the attacking stat. So combined with Stamina, it's actually really strong. Pros, its stats are really good. It's bulky, it's strong, it's slow. Stamina is really good, and it is probably one of the best Dynamax users on this list because of how defensive it can be. So you Dynamax, so first of all, you give this thing an Assault Vest. Boom, you fix its slightly subpar special defense. You Dynamax. You go for ground, you raise your special defense. You go for steel, you raise your defense, and all the while your stamina is building up. It's really good. It's a really, really strong Dynamaxer. And if you pair this with, say, like a Heal Pulse support Trick Room user, like why am I blanking? Well, whatever. If you pair it with a healer, this thing could be nay impossible to bring down. Cons though, its move pool is just utter garbage. Heavy Slam is really its only steel move, and it doesn't affect Dynamax Pokemon. That sucks. It really, I mean, granted, ground, rock, and fighting are really good, but body press is only really strong if you have the defensive boosts going, and close combat lowers your defensive. So its move pool is not really that good. And another con is that it's very setup heavy. The reason why it's so high is because it has so much potential. Unlike Snorlax, who, Belly Drum, cuts your HP in half. Mudsdale just needs to survive 1 attack, and it's just bing, 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 bing. It keeps raising its defense, keeps taking more hits, and that's really, really good. But that's also sort of an issue because you can't switch out. It takes some time to build up. So it's a give or take. It's a give or take. But I do think it has immense potential. Moving on, we've got number 4, which is Hatterene. Now, if you watched my Trick Room Setter video, you might have seen that Hatterene was the number 1 Trick Room setter that was a combination with Indeedee, and the reason why it's a good combination is because Hatterene's actually a really good Trick Room abuser. It is Psychic Fairy. Now, I listed 90 attack. It does have 90 attack. Granted, its special attack is 136 and its speed is 29. Its 90 attack is usable, and it does have actually a really good physical move pool. I didn't list it here because, generally speaking, you're going to go special, but it does have an option if you want to try. Notable ability is Magic Bounce. The other two aren't really that great. Notable moves are Psychic, Dazzling Gleam, Life Dew, which heals both you and your partner, Psyshock, Heal Pulse, Mystical Fire, Giga Drain, Magical Powder, which changes your target's typing to Psychic. There's some actually pretty cool combos with that. Helping Hand, Trick Room, Dark Pulse, and Shadow Ball. So Hatterene sort of functions as, and one of the pro is it doubles as a setter. So you set Trick Room, and then you sweep in it. And you don't have to worry about anything. You have the Indeedee next to you helping you out. Very good. But it also, you know, it can do some supportive stuff. Like if you bring in, say, a Hyperio, and you just want to drop some Rock Slides, you can just Helping Hand the Hyperio, and it really doesn't matter. You can heal it. It's just really, it's really good. It's really good. And there's a reason why it's one of the most common Pokemon used in Trick Room. There really is. Its move pool is good. It's a little shallower compared to some of the other options on this list. But it gets what it needs. Mystical Fire is actually really strong. Giga Drain, I didn't even know it got until I made this video, and I was like, wow, that's actually really good. Giga Drain is actually something I might switch Mystical Fire to, because Mystical Fire has fucked me over a few times. Not good. I accidentally hit Defiant Pokemon with that. Its stats are really good. It has high special attack, low speed, good defenses. Not great defenses, you know, compared to some of the other Pokemon on the list. It's a little bit frail on the frailer side, but hey. Cons, it's a little bit more of a supportive move pool. If it got a few other things, that would be great. I would have loved to see Power Gem on this Pokemon. I think Power Gem would have been really nice. Because then it has a little bit of a better way to deal with Arcanine. Right now, your best way to deal with Arcanine is Dynamaxing and going for Psychic, or Max Mindstorm, which isn't a bad idea, but it doesn't one-hit KO, unfortunately. I think Power Gem would. Yeah, I think it deserved a little bit more options, but you know, it's got what it's got, and it's got what it needs. And another con is it's just a small lady in a trench coat. I mean, I really couldn't think of another con for Hatterene. I do think that it is one of the greatest, not greatest, one of the best this generation. It does have quite a lot on the table to offer. But it really is just a small lady in a trench coat. Just look at those little dangly arms. Clearly just a small lady. Number 3 is going to be Hyperio. Hyperio is definitely one of the most popular Trick Room abusers right now. It's Rock Ground. It has 140 attack, 40 speed. Notable abilities are Lightning Rod and Solid Rock. I'll get back to that in a little bit. Notable moves are Rock Slide, High Horsepower, Hammer Arm, Mega Horn, Fire, Ice, Thunder Punch, Avalanche, Iron Head, Crunch, Poison Jab, Heat Crash, Body Press, Shadow Claw, and Superpower. Pros, stats are really good. It's very bulky, except for on the special side. Very strong, relatively slow. It's a little bit faster than a lot of the Pokemon on this list, but that's okay. Its move pool, pretty good. Pretty damn good. Very good coverage. And Solid Rock plus Dynamax. So similar to Mudsdale, but without requiring the setup. Super effective moves are not as strong against Hyperio. And combine that with the health of Dynamaxing, it's actually really, really tough. I don't think there's a single way to one-hit KO this Pokemon yet. I'm trying to think. Maybe like a Choice Specs Inteleon. Maybe. I don't know. You would definitely want to use a water or a grass type, but I don't think there's very many. I mean, obviously there's Dracovish. Dracovish is definitely going to 1-hit KO Hyperio. No ways around that, I don't think. I haven't really run calcs for Hyperio. I don't really want to. But it's really bulky. Cons, multiple weaknesses. Despite the bulk, if you don't Dynamax, it's not as effective. And it's weak to pretty much every type of under the sun, you know? It's weak to grass, ground, water, steel, fighting, Did I say grass? I said grass. I think it's weak to ice. I don't remember. It might be weak to ice. I always forget if rock resists ice. It's not a good thing. Whatever. And one of the other cons is, despite its move pool, its move pool isn't filled with a lot of good 100% accuracy moves. Even its stabs, it doesn't really have, other than Earthquake or Bulldoze, but you would never use Bulldoze on a Trick Room team, unless you're bulldozing your own there's specific cases. But like high horsepower Rock Slide, Stone Edge, they both do not hit 100% of the time, and they do cost battles. Hammer Arm, Mega Horn, what else? That's about it. Those don't hit all the time. And then the other ones, other than like the elemental punches, aren't great. So like Avalanche is great ice type attack because it could hit 120 base power, but it requires you to be hit first. And in Trick Room, you generally don't want that. There are combinations, like I said, with the Bulldoze. Bronzong, Bulldoze, plus Weakness Policy, plus Avalanche is actually pretty strong. And then the other options are great. Heat Crash, similar to Heavy Slam, doesn't affect Dynamax Pokemon. Body Press, unlike Mudstale, there's no way to really increase that on Rhyperior. I think he gets Curse, but setting up, specifically using a setting up move is not great in 4v4. Shadow Claw is not very strong, and generally speaking, Rock Slide or High Horsepower will be better. But it's just there as an option. Superpower lowers your attack and defense, so I never like using that. But yeah, I do think Rhyperior is definitely one of the best, and there's a reason for that. Everyone's using it, so that is number 3. Number 2 is going to be Drampa. Drampa is normal dragon. It has 135 special attack, 36 speed. All 3 of its abilities are good: Berserk, Sap Sipper, and Cloud 9. Of notable moves, and get ready for this because this is an essay: Hyper Voice, Draco Meteor, Ice Beam, Dragon Pulse, Thunder, Extrasensory, Solar Beam, Snarl, Flamethrower, Hydro Pump, Surf, Blizzard, Thunderbolt, Focus Blast, Shadow Ball, Fire Blast, Heat Wave, and Hurricane. And I think there was another one, Grass Knot. Yeah, I didn't have room for Grass Knot. I didn't feel like making room for Grass Knot. Yeah, so the biggest pro about Drampa is it literally fits any single comp that you want. Oh my god, it gets good rain moves, it gets good hail moves, it gets good sun moves. There's not really good sand moves, but it could work in sand. It does so much. It has such a wide, diverse move pool, and its abilities help with that too, because Cloud9 is anti-weather. Sap Sipper, if your team is really weak to grass, boom, you now have an immunity. Berserk is probably the best standard ability it has, but we'll get into why the abilities are sort of cons. Stats are great. It has a huge attack. Not as much as some of the other ones. It's weaker than Vikavolt, but it has a better move pool. That's why it's higher up. Typing is actually pretty good because offensively it's not the greatest typing, but defensively it's actually really good. And then cons. Stabs, like I just said, normal dragon are really not great attacking types. Generally speaking, I never run a dragon type move on Drampa because there's not really any point. Most of what I hit with Draco Meteor I would rather hit with Hyper Voice. And its abilities are conditional. So unlike, say, Hyperio, which is always constant, it's a passive ability. Everything that you get hit is affected by that. Berserk, you need to hit a certain HP threshold. Sap Sipper is only good if they have a lot of grass-type moves, or like Sleep Powder. Like, against a Butterfree team, Sap Sipper Drampa is actually really strong. Cloud9's only really good against weather teams, and even then, like, most of the weather teams have a way to deal with Drampa. But still, I think because it's so flexible and so strong that it can literally fit into any team you make, because it hits, I think it has 16 or 17 of all the types in its move pool. And they're not bad moves either. The weakest move it has probably is Snarl and Extrasensory. Everything else is really strong. And even Extrasensory is not that bad. Snarl has its purposes. But I'm sure I missed some attacks here because I could have sworn it got Dark Pulse. I could be wrong. It might not get Dark Pulse. That's why it's not there. But I could have skipped over it. But it has such good coverage. It's so good. Oh my god, it fits on any single team, and that's why it's number 2. Why, like, you know, other Pokemon are while other Pokemon are stronger than Drampa or have a better focused move pool, the reason Drampa is number 2 is because it is strong, it is slow, and it can literally fit on pretty much any single team, and that's what makes it so great. So, before we move on to number 1, we are going to talk about an honorable mention, and that is Torkoal. Torkoal was on the list originally, but then I remembered Escavalier exists, and I knocked Torkoal out. Torkoal is a fire type. Its stats are 85 special attack, 20 speed. Notable ability, Drought. That's the only one you should be using on Torkoal. Notable moves, Eruption, Heat Wave, Clear Smog, Flamethrower, Will-O-Wisp, Yawn, Sludge Bomb, and Earth Power. Pros, Eruption. In Trick Room, Eruption is king. It will win. Oh, well, I might as well describe why Eruption. So, Eruption deals damage based on how much HP you have. So, if you manage to get into Trick Room with full HP, you can just slam out Eruptions all day long. And even if they resist it, it's probably going to do a good chunk of damage. So that's why Torkoal's used most often, is because it has the strongest fire Trick Room in the game. Weather Wars, it will win all speed Weather Wars because it is the slowest. I don't think there's a single possible way for weather to be like, and I'm talking about, you know, obviously the weather setting abilities like Sandstream and what is the hail one? Snow Warning, or Drizzle. I'm talking about those. I'm not talking about actually using the like Sandstorm or Rain Dance or Sunny Day. I'm talking about the abilities, because that's the easiest way to get that up. Dude, I don't think there's a single possible way for those abilities to work against Torkoal. Torkoal will always be the one to get to win the Weather Wars, and that's really, 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 really good. Because even if you don't want to use Torkoal as an offensive Pokemon, you can just switch it in and disrupt their reign. You know, it's great. I love it. Cons, and the reason why it's an honorable mention and not on the list, its move pool is just bad. It gets Fire, Poison, Ground. It wouldn't be that bad if it didn't have 85 special attack. You know, similar to Araquanid and Dracovish, it doesn't really do much outside of its stab. Its stab elemental attack. It really doesn't, and that's a little bit of a disappointment. Another thing is that Eruption is also a con. Once you start getting damaged by something, Eruption starts to be not that strong, and then you're stuck with Heat Wave, which, yeah, it's still powerful as long as you have the sun up, and again, that's another con. You desperately require the sun. As long as you have sun up, you'll still do decent damage, but there's stronger fire types, you know. Chandelure is stronger than Torkoal. It's a lot faster, but you know what I'm saying. Basically, what I'm getting at is that Torkoal's really good, but it's a one-trick turtle. There's not very much it can do, and once it starts doing it, there are ways to stop it from doing it. So, that's why it's an honorable mention. Finally, number 1 is Copperija. Steel type, 130 attack, 30 speed, notable ability, Sheer Force. Notable moves, Iron Head, Play Rough, Rock Slide, High Horsepower, Superpower, Brick Break, Zen Headbutt, Power Whip, Heat Crash, and Body Press. So first of all, I would like to clear the air. It does get Heavy Slam, and it does get Heavy Metal, and it, I think, becomes the strongest Heavy Slam in the game, even considering all generations. The reason I didn't list it is because, again, Heavy Slam does not affect Dynamax Pokemon, and Heavy Metal only affects Heat Crash, and because Heavy Metal only affects Heat Crash and Heavy Metal, or Heavy Slam, goddamn, Sheer Force is so much better. So much better. You might miss out on a few KOs with Iron Head, although I highly doubt that. Compared obviously to Heavy Metal and Heavy Slam. but it has such a good sheer force move pool. Well, not a great sheer force move pool. There are definitely a lot of sheer force Pokemon that do better. Maybe not in this game, you know. Nidoking, Nidoqueen, those have a much better sheer force move pool. However, you know, pros, stats, defensive, offensive, and slow. It hits everything. Sheer force means that it's going to hit like a truck. I'm pretty sure it's stronger than Hyperio, even though Hyperio has a lot more attack. Because Sheer Force and Life Orb are just such a good combo. Now, if you don't know what Sheer Force and Life Orb does, so Sheer Force, you get, I think it's 30% more damage on your attacks at the cost of secondary effects. So Iron Head has a secondary effect of flinching. A Sheer Force Iron Head cannot flinch, but it's stronger than a regular Iron Head. And Life Orb works with this because whenever you attack, whenever you make an attack and deal damage, you lose 10% of your HP, but Sheer Force takes that 10% away, so it's actually a free damage boost, and that's really good. There's pretty much no item you ever really want to run on Hyperio other than Life Orb. You could run, like, you know, Assault Vest, that wouldn't be too bad, but you'd be losing out on a lot of damage. Cons, pure Steel. I think if it was, like, Steel Rock or Steel Fairy would have been really good. Obviously, we know, like, you know, someone like Mawile was really good, and Steel Fairy is a damn good ability. But because it's just steel, it doesn't get stabbed on anything else, and that sort of does mess around with its power. But again, it's still really powerful. And another con is it does have a really diverse move pool. I mean, just look at that. It gets grass, it gets fighting, it gets psychic, it gets fire. Although, again, Heat Crash isn't really that great. But it doesn't have a very diverse sheer force move pool. You get Iron Head, Play Rough, Rock Slide, and Zen Headbutt. I mean, it's still good. I don't really ever see anyone using Zen Headbutt, but it's still pretty good. It's still really good. Actually, is there any reason to use Zen Headbutt? I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe. There might be. It does have a good move pool, but not a good sheer force move pool. But that's not, I mean, that's really not a big deal. It does hit really strong, and I know there are a lot of other Pokemon that might seem better than Hyperio, like maybe Hyperio or Hatterene. But I think Hyperio is the best because defensively it's really good. Steel is a very good typing to have defensively, and offensively it can hit a lot of things. I have never been let down by Hyperio. It's the first abuser I made, and it's the only one that's stayed on my team every single time I've changed it. So, with that said, that is the top 10, although technically it's like top 13 or 14 Trick Room abusers in the game currently. I do think there are a few coming, or at least one that's coming that will be really good, and that's going to be Rillaboom. Whenever we get Rillaboom's hidden ability, which is Grassy Surge, I think Rillaboom's going to be very good. There is a chance that we might get Incineroar again. I know it's not in the Pokedex, but there were some leaks. So leak warning, I guess. I don't know. There were some leaks that it's like in the game files, and there's not many in the game files, so that kind of points in the direction that Incineroar is coming back. Obviously, Incineroar is a very, very good Pokemon. I think it's good in Trick Room as well. I think that's really about it in terms of Pokemon that are going to be good inside of Trick Room. I think if Primarina does come, Primarina's a pretty solid choice. Not as great as the other Pokemon, though. But yeah, so that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Really do appreciate it. I hope to catch you guys at the next episode. Peace.